Emma and Daniel met in high school, their love blossoming in the hallways of Jefferson High. They were inseparable, their teenage hearts believing they would conquer the world together. Their days were filled with laughter, late-night talks, and dreams of a future where nothing would keep them apart. From school dances to secret notes passed in class, their love was the kind that novels were written about. But life had other plans. When college decisions arrived, Emma was accepted to a prestigious university on the East Coast, while Daniel received a scholarship for a college across the country. Their love, though deep and true, struggled against the weight of distance. At first, they tried to keep it alive, letters, long phone calls, and visits during the holidays. The first few months were filled with excitement and promise, but over time, their conversations became shorter, their letters less frequent. Emma immersed herself in her studies, while Daniel found solace in new friendships. Eventually, the calls stopped, and an unspoken understanding settled between them. They had to say goodbye. Years turned into decades. Both moved on, building their separate lives. Emma married Jonathan, a kind-hearted lawyer, and had 2 wonderful children. She built a life of stability and comfort, never looking back at what could have been. Daniel found love with Sarah, a compassionate teacher, and built a family of his own. He found joy in watching his children grow, in quiet evenings spent with his wife. They were content, devoted to their spouses and children, never imagining that their paths would cross again. Yet, fate has a way of bringing back what once was. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Emma walked into the bookstore downtown. She had always loved the smell of books, the feeling of pages between her fingers. With her children now grown and out of the house, she had more time to indulge in the simple joys she had once treasured. As she browsed through the shelves, a familiar voice reached her ears, a voice she had not heard in over 30 years. "Excuse me, is this the latest novel by James Harper?" Her heart skipped a beat. She turned around slowly, and there he was. Daniel. Time had changed them, adding wrinkles where once there was only smooth skin, and silver strands now ran through his dark hair. But his eyes, those same warm brown eyes, held the same depth and kindness she had fallen in love with years ago. For a moment, she felt like a teenager again, standing in the hallways of Jefferson High, waiting for him to walk her to class. "Daniel." Her voice trembled, a mixture of shock and something else, something she had buried deep inside. His eyes widened. "Emma? I can't believe it. Is it really you?" They stood there for a moment, frozen in time, memories flooding back like a tidal wave. The bookstore, the people around them, everything else faded away. All that remained was the past colliding with the present. They decided to sit at a nearby cafe, their conversation hesitant at first, then spilling into hours of catching up. They spoke of their families, their children, their careers. They reminisced about their high school years, about the innocence of first love and the pain of parting ways. But beneath the polite words lay a question neither dared to ask. Was the love they had once shared still there? As they sat across from each other, Emma found herself noticing the way Daniel still ran his hand through his hair when he was nervous, the way he smiled when he spoke about his children. And Daniel couldn't help but notice how Emma's laugh still had the same warmth, how her eyes still sparkled when she spoke about the things she loved. But reality loomed over them. They had lived entire lives apart. They had spouses, families, commitments. Could old love truly be rekindled, or was this merely a fleeting moment of nostalgia? Over the next few weeks, Emma and Daniel found excuses to see each other. At first, it was just an occasional coffee, an innocent conversation about life. But as time passed, they realized the pull between them was stronger than ever. One evening, they met at a quiet park. The air was crisp, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange. They sat on a bench, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Emma hesitated before speaking. "I feel like we've stepped into a dream. Like we're teenagers again, sneaking away to talk. But we're not teenagers, Daniel. We have families, responsibilities." Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I know, and I love my family. But Emma, I haven't felt like this in years. Seeing you again, it's like a part of me that I buried long ago has come back to life." Emma looked down at her hands. "What are we supposed to do with these feelings? Ignore them? Pretend they don't exist?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't have all the answers. But I do know that we owe it to ourselves to be honest. At the very least, we should figure out what this means." She nodded, though her heart felt heavy with uncertainty. The past had returned, stirring emotions she thought she had long forgotten. The question was, what would they do now? The days that followed were filled with confusion. Emma found herself lost in thought, unable to focus on her daily routines. Her husband, Jonathan, noticed the change. "You've been distant lately," he remarked one evening. "Is everything all right?" Emma forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind. Work, the kids' life." Jonathan nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer, but guilt gnawed at her. How could she explain that the ghost of her first love had returned, shaking the foundation of everything she had built? Meanwhile, Daniel faced his own struggles. Sarah, his wife, sensed something was off. "You've been distracted, Dan. You come home, but your mind is somewhere else. What's going on?" He hesitated before answering. "Just stress from work. Nothing to worry about." But there was something to worry about. They were both at a crossroads, torn between their past and their present. The love they had shared was real, perhaps more real than anything they had ever experienced. But could they risk everything they had built for a second chance? Fate had brought them back together. Now they had to decide what to do with the opportunity. Days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself unable to escape the weight of her emotions. She loved her family, loved the life she had built, but there was no denying the fire that had reignited between her and Daniel. She spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, questioning everything she had once believed was certain. Meanwhile, Daniel was facing the same internal battle. Seeing Emma again had awakened something in him, a feeling of passion and excitement that had long been buried beneath the routines of life. But was it fair to his wife, to his children, to allow himself to indulge in a love from the past? One evening, Emma and Daniel met at the same quiet park where they had spoken weeks before. The air was thick with unspoken words as they sat side by side on the worn wooden bench. "I don't know what to do," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I'm being pulled in two different directions." Daniel sighed. "I know. Me too. But we can't keep meeting like this, Emma. It's not fair to them or to us." She turned to face him, searching his eyes for some kind of answer. "Then what do we do? Do we walk away? Pretend this never happened?" Daniel hesitated, then reached for her hand, his touch both familiar and foreign. "I don't want to pretend, but I also don't want to hurt anyone. Maybe we need to take some time to figure out what this really means." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "I don't want to lose you again." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I don't want to lose you. But we have to be sure. This can't be just nostalgia. If we're going to make a choice, it has to be the right one." They sat in silence, the weight of their dilemma pressing down on them. The choice ahead was clear: stay in the comfort of their current lives, or risk everything for the love they had lost. But was love alone enough? The night of their last meeting at the park weighed heavily on both Emma and Daniel. They had left without a resolution, without a promise, only with the painful acknowledgement that what they felt was real. Emma returned home to her husband and children, trying to slip back into her routine as if nothing had changed. But everything had. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a reality that no longer fit. Her husband noticed her distance, the way she seemed lost in thought, the way she hesitated before answering simple questions. "Is everything all right, Em?" he asked one evening, as they sat at the dinner table. She forced a smile. "Of course. Just a bit tired. Work has been exhausting." He nodded, accepting her answer, but the doubt lingered in his eyes. Meanwhile, Daniel was struggling just as much. He had always been a devoted father, a reliable husband. But now, when he looked at his wife, he saw the years they had spent together, the good times and the challenges, yet something was missing. Passion, excitement, a spark that had long since faded. One night, unable to sleep, he sat in his study, staring at an old box of letters. Letters he had exchanged with Emma when they were young. He ran his fingers over the worn paper, reading words filled with love and dreams they had never fulfilled. He picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over Emma's number. A part of him wanted to hear her voice, to tell her how much he missed her. But another part reminded him of the life he had built, the people who depended on him. Instead of calling, he sent a simple message. "I can't stop thinking about you." Emma saw the message as she lay in bed, her husband sleeping beside her. Her heart pounded. The past wasn't staying in the past. It was pulling her back, forcing her to face the truth she had been avoiding. Did she reply? Did she ignore it? For a long time, she stared at the screen before finally typing. "Neither can I." Emma and Daniel had crossed an invisible line. Their message exchange became more frequent, a secret space where they could express the feelings they couldn't share with anyone else. The tension grew, electric and intoxicating. Every message deepened the longing. Every reply brought back memories of what once was. "Do you remember that summer at the lake?" Daniel wrote one evening. Emma smiled at her phone, nostalgia washing over her. "Of course. You pushed me into the water. And you pulled me in after you," he replied. "That was the best summer of my life." Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed. "Me too." Their conversations became a dangerous dance. Stolen moments of laughter, confessions of lingering love, silent admissions that their hearts were no longer where they were supposed to be. Then, one evening, Daniel sent a message that changed everything. "I need to see you." Emma's breath caught. She knew this was a risk, but she also knew she wanted it. "Where?" "The old cafe. Tomorrow at noon." Her hands trembled as she typed her response. "I'll be there." The next day, Emma found herself standing in front of the small cafe where they had spent countless afternoons in their youth. As she walked in, she saw him, Daniel, waiting at a corner table, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not their spouses. Not their past. Not the consequences. Just them. Emma hesitated at the entrance of the cafe, her heart hammering in her chest. Every rational thought told her to turn around and walk away. But her feet had already carried her inside. Daniel stood as she approached the table, his gaze searching hers for answers neither of them had. "You came," he said softly, a hint of relief in his voice. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted, sitting down opposite him. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only with the soft hum of conversations around them and the clinking of coffee cups. "Emma." Daniel reached for her hand across the table, hesitating before their fingers touched. "I don't know what we're doing, but I do know that I can't stop thinking about you." Her breath hitched at his words. She had spent so many nights trying to ignore the ache in her chest, trying to convince herself that it was just nostalgia, a fleeting moment of weakness. But sitting here, looking into his eyes, she knew it was so much more. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "But what does that mean for us?" Daniel exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know. I don't want to hurt anyone. But I also don't want to live my life wondering, what if?" Emma swallowed hard. "Neither do I." A waitress interrupted them, placing their drinks on the table. They both thanked her before looking at each other again, the weight of their conversation hanging between them. "What if we just take things one step at a time?" Daniel suggested. "We don't have to make any decisions right now. Let's just be honest with each other." Emma hesitated but eventually nodded. "Okay, one step at a time." Despite their agreement deep down, they both knew that the line had already been crossed. Emma and Daniel's meetings became more frequent, carefully planned moments where they could just be together. Coffee turned into long walks, walks turned into dinners. The tension between them was undeniable, a force neither of them could resist much longer. One evening, after a long dinner, Daniel walked Emma to her car. The street was quiet, the air thick with unspoken words. He took her hand, his thumb grazing her palm. "Tell me to walk away, Emma, and I will." She looked up at him, her breath unsteady. Every part of her knew she was standing at the edge of something dangerous. But she also knew that she had never felt more alive. "I can't," she whispered. Daniel cupped her face, his lips hovering over hers. "Then tell me what you want." She didn't answer with words. She closed the distance, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that held years of longing, regret, and love. It was a kiss that shattered the last walls between them. They knew there was no turning back now. Days turned into weeks. The weight of what had happened between them was unbearable. They had kissed. They had admitted the truth. And yet, they still had lives waiting for them at home. Emma avoided Daniel's messages at first, fearing what they meant. But she also couldn't deny the emptiness she felt when she wasn't talking to him. Her husband noticed her distance, his frustration growing. "Emma, I don't know what's going on with you," he finally said one evening. "But I feel like you're slipping away from me." She had no response. Because in truth, she was slipping away from him, from the life they had built, from the illusion of happiness she had held onto for so long. Meanwhile, Daniel faced his own struggles. His wife, though oblivious to the specifics, sensed the change in him. "You've been different lately," she said, watching him carefully. "Is there something you need to tell me?" He hesitated, torn between honesty and the fear of breaking everything apart. "I'm just feeling lost," he said finally. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. It all came to a breaking point when Emma and Daniel met again. This time, there was no pretense, no excuse of just talking. "I can't live like this," Daniel confessed. Not when I know what real love feels like. Emma looked at him, her heart pounding. Daniel, what are we supposed to do? He took her hands in his grip firm and unwavering. We choose love. We choose happiness. We stop pretending that we're okay in lives that no longer fulfill us. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of clarity, of understanding. It wouldn't be easy. There would be pain, consequences, and difficult conversations. But love, the kind they had found again, was worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, Emma and Daniel were ready to fight.